Joining us on 98 Not Out, we have someone who's by now familiar to all of you cricket fans who've been watching the fantastic coverage on Channel 4 of the India versus England series. Welcome along to 98 Not Out, Mr. Rishi Persad. How are you?
Darren, thank you very much. Lovely intro. Thank you. Yes, thanks for saying those nice things about the Channel 4 cricket coverage as well. I appreciate that.
I have to add that you did not put me up to saying any of that either.
Well, you know, people these days, you can never tell. Cynical people out there might think that actually happened, but yeah, entirely, what's the word, that organic, that people often use. Yeah, very organic. Thank you.
It has had a genuinely good reception, and you've been joined by some quite heavyweight names in the world of cricket so far. Sir Alistair Cook, Sir Andrew Strauss, Ebony Rainsford Brent. That must help.
Oh, absolutely. When the deal was announced and we were told that we were going to be able to do it, Channel 4, there's always that immediate concern of being compared to the brilliant coverage on Sky Sports. And like a lot of the people that work on Sky Sports, I'm a cricket fan, and there were some of my heroes growing up watching them, and then being directly compared to them, or at least put in the same category as you're doing something that they've done, and you could potentially be judged against them, which people do anyway. People judge other people nowadays willy-nilly. So I was a bit concerned by that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The fact that we've had three brilliant pundits over the first two tests in Ebony, Sir Alistair Cook and Sir Andrew Strauss, has been superb, and they've worked really well. I think the fact that in the first test it was just myself and Sir Alistair Cook, a lot of people pointed out that maybe the addition of an extra pundit would work. So when Sir Andrew Strauss came in and Channel 4 moved to bring in Ebony, I think that worked really well. And in particular, from the first to the second test, when you say about people being positive about the coverage, that was one of the aspects that I think a lot of people enjoyed. The fact that they had those two pundits to bounce off each other, as well as, you know, engage in the important discussions around what was happening in the second test.
Was it all as last minute as it appeared to be publicly?
Yes. The first I'd heard of it was, or first that I heard the Channel 4 were in the running for it, was about 10 days before the first test. And then I was told that we were expecting to hear from the contract negotiations probably the week before, as in the Thursday or the Friday before the first test, and that sort of spilled on into the following week. And I think it was the Wednesday before the first test that it was announced that officially, and yes, like everybody else, I was in the same boat, and a lot of people at Channel 4 were in the same boat, that it was 48 hours or slightly less than 48 hours before the deal was done.
I think you did strike quite a chord in the presentation of your program, in the sense that, you know, if you are following this avidly, you are getting up in the middle of the night to watch something. And I think there's a kind of a feel, the fact that you're all in comfy chairs, it's not a brightly lit studio, there are not, you know, garish graphics, you know, hurting your eyes. It does kind of really seem to suit the timing of everything and the feel of the occasion, I think.
Well, I think so. It's funny that there's been a lot of chat about the studio and the chairs and whether or not it's the right tone. I find it difficult to be certain, as you pointed out, to be absolutely certain what the right tone of what the studio must look like when you're on air at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3:45 in the morning. You know, how bright and buzzy do you want it? People are probably either in their beds or sneaking down to the sofa to watch the cricket at that time. So it's not entirely, you know, lights on, let's turn the music up because we're ready to go for the start of Test cricket. And Test cricket generally has that sort of more relaxed feel, that easier pace to it. So I think, obviously I'm biased, but I think the studio tone is the right one for the time of the day and the setup. I mean, interesting, obviously the third test is a day-nighter, so we start a bit later. We're on air from 8:30 every day. So there may be a little bit more buzz and light about it, hopefully. But the comfy chairs for the first test that both Sir Alistair Cook and I enjoyed, they were discarded for the second test, which I was slightly disappointed by, because they were really comfy, genuinely. In between passages of play where we could sit back and relax for a minute, there's definitely a moment where you swing your leg over the chair and you can then just sort of relax back into it for a bit and just watch cricket, which is quite enjoyable. So yeah, I missed it in the second test, but the ones that we had for the second test weren't too bad.
No danger of the eyelids drooping in the first test.
Well, I won't mention any names of those that perhaps succumbed to a little bit of eyelid drooping.
Has it been fairly brutal on the? I mean, as you say, the next test is a day-night test, is a bit easier. But you must have been almost doing like a night shift in these last couple of weeks.
The first time the alarm went off on the first day, on the first day of the first test, all I thought about was the excitement, nerves, and looking forward to it. So I didn't really think too much about what I was doing in terms of the time I was getting up and what everybody else might be doing at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I was a bit bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at that point. No probs. But as we moved into the first test and then got progressively through the 5 days, I suddenly started waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning thinking, this is hard. As in, I wouldn't want to be doing this every day. I could do it for test cricket. I could do it for cricket. Yes, I could do it for the things I love, sports. But if I had to do this every day, I would really struggle. Primarily because nothing else is happening. You walk into the studios where we're based, and it's empty. The car park is empty. There's one guy on the gate, and he's so tired. The guy on the gate. I shouldn't probably say this, but he's so tired. He doesn't even look when you arrive. So you walk towards the gate, and if you look over the counter, he's actually laying back in his chair like this. So you walk through the gate, and he just shouts, "Yeah," and you say, "Channel 4 cricket," and he goes, "Yeah." And that's the conversation you have. He hasn't seen me. He doesn't know who it is. He doesn't know what I'm bringing in. But it's that sort of nothing's going on at 1:30 in the morning, 1:45 in the morning, and people just kind of let things just slide.
You're out at Ealing, I believe, famous old movie studio. Is there anything else going on, or is it really that dead?
Well, by the time we leave at the end of the day's play, there are a few trailers and there's a lot that happens at Ealing Studios. Because I work there for a racing channel, actually, racing TV. So I know the studios quite well, and occasionally you see some Hollywood film stars. You've seen the likes of Brad Pitt, Bradley Cooper, Sienna Miller, all sort of wandering around, going to their trailers and doing their filming and stuff like that. So you're normally peering out the windows. I think at the moment Uma Thurman might be doing a film there. At least that's a rumor going around when we're watching the cricket. It's like, oh, Uma Thurman's here doing a film, and it's like, oh well, we'll bump into her. Does she like cricket? Come in, have a look, see what's going on.
Well, yeah. Well, let's have a race to see who can get her first, you or us.
Well, now that we know we can just walk in at the gate, there'll be hordes of people turning up.
I'm giving away all the secrets here.
And the coverage from Channel 4, does it extend beyond the Test matches? Are you going to be showing any of the white ball stuff live?
I don't know what the confirmation is. I know Sky and Channel 4 are certainly all interested in getting the rights for the white ball cricket. Again, I'm not privy to those conversations, but right. I believe from what I've read, Sky might be ahead in the race, but we'll wait and find out. Hopefully Channel 4 are still involved. It'd be great to do that as well, because obviously it'll be daytime matches for UK viewers, so it'll be quite exciting.
And the viewing figures have been encouraging as well, as we always knew they would be once we got back to being on free-to-air television. I think in the first test, it was 1.1 million was the average from what I saw, which is good. And this will be a shot in the arm for the game of cricket in this country. Yeah,
I think the figures have been really strong. Channel 4 have been very pleased with it. The on-demand stuff on all four, I think during the first test was a record for 1 week on all four. And yeah, the viewing figures, they sort of peaked at 1.7 million. They averaged on a few of the days at 1.1. And even I think on the Sunday of the second test, where England, obviously their backs were against the wall at that point, quite obviously, I think even that got 1.7 peak.
Wow.
So it was pretty strong. Well, certainly 1.5 million plus peak. So quite strong figures. And I'm always wary of saying about being too adamant about free to air and how it reflects on on the other broadcasters, because I'm like you guys, you know, I love it, and I love the fact that Sky have been brilliant for all these years, and I've enjoyed the Sky coverage. But also, I grew up in an era where it was on the BBC, then it was on Channel 4. You know, people talking about nostalgia and, you know, how Channel 4 might be a little bit, some of the coverage is based on nostalgia, but I go back to when, at the end of a day's play on the BBC, they used to hold up a sheet of A4 when a batsman got 100, and they'd done a wagon wheel, and they'd done different colours. So, you know, the fours would be in blue, the sixes would be in red, and all the singles in green or whatever. But it was on a sheet of A4, and they would sort of hold it up to camera, and that was your wagon wheel. And at the time, you didn't think to yourself, well, that's a bit, you know, rustic and a bit old-fashioned. But at the time, you just thought, and actually, even now, I quite like that old style. You know, I think cricket fans by nature are traditionalists, and I quite enjoy a little bit of old school. So I've enjoyed the old school style and on the Channel 4 coverage as well.
Quite quaint, actually, isn't it, to think that while somebody's been meticulously doing the dots in the scorebook, somebody else has had a ruler and some coloured pens, and they're drawing straight lines every shot.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Well, I mean, just the idea of scoring in a scoring book is so it's so demanding on your time, and it requires care and attention. Just like if you were to do a wagon wheel with, not that, you know, obviously producing graphics doesn't require care and attention, but there's something a little bit more romantic about sitting with a piece of paper and a pen and making dots and you know, putting all the right symbols for every score, every ball that's bowled. I mean, we've all done a bit of scoring when we've been 12th man, so we know what that's like.
It's also quite reminiscent of cricket at club level, because a lot of clubs where I've been playing, there seems to be quite often someone, usually a lady, with the whole packet of different coloured biros and felt tips and whatever else, and putting together these amazing scorebooks. And like you say, the rulers come out and the different colours, different you know, highlighter pens and all the rest of it. So, you know, I think it's still out there, really, particularly at grassroots level.
It's like a specialist task. You know, when you get a really good scorer. I mean, I played cricket in Hertfordshire League years and years ago, and you had a designated scorer, and they would be there exactly with all the tools. The stationery at their disposal was quite magnificent, and the scorebook at the end of the day would be an absolute work of art.
Yeah,
but, you know, that I enjoyed that because someone took the care and the time to make it look like that. And it was to be celebrated, you know, not sniffed at.
And woe betide disturbing them while they're at work.
Yeah. or where the umpire's made the wrong call and has to, you know, if it's one short and they run two or something like that. It's like, the reaction in the score in the scoring hut would be like, no, my book's ruined. Yeah.
You mentioned there very briefly about a racing channel, and of course, avid Channel 4 viewers will spot you from the racing coverage. We'll talk a little bit about racing. Obviously, we're just about a year on from the Cheltenham Festival that caused all the fuss as the pandemic descended last year. Racing, is that a sport that depends on crowds actually being there as much as others?
Yeah, I think it's very precarious for race courses in particular. Obviously, the race courses, they get money from rights. You know, when races are run, broadcast, sponsorship, the levy that exists through bookmakers. But yeah, crowds are massive for race courses, and if this situation carries on for much longer, there will be race courses that will be threatened. Their existence will be threatened. I think it's obviously a necessity not to have crowds at the moment. Can understand that, but the sooner, or as soon as it's viable to allow crowds back, the better, because it's a simple fact that financially racecourses cannot afford to just exist as venues to host a sport without a crowd. You know, there's so much involved with hospitality, not just race days, but racecourses now are venues through the whole year for functions, hospitality. So it's important for them as businesses, because they are businesses, and obviously they employ a lot of people, and naturally a lot have been furloughed, etc. But it's very precarious times for racecourses. Without crowds, they're they're going to be in trouble.
You've got a bit of a history about racehorsing as well, haven't you? Wasn't your dad a breeder or a racehorse owner?
Well, yeah, no, I owe my dad, or I can blame my dad for a lot, because my dad was the one who used to take me racing and cricket when I was a child growing up in Trinidad. That's how I used to basically spend my spare time. I used to be attached to him. So during the summer holidays, I used to go with him to the races. We used to go with him to watch racehorses train. And then every time there was international cricket in Trinidad, we'd go to the Queen's Park Oval. So when we went at the Queen's Park Oval, when I was young, the youngsters can't go into the members enclosure. My dad was a member at the Queen's Park Oval. So I'd go to the cricket. He would take some other mates, or other mates would go with him who weren't members. And then I'd be left with them for the day in the general grounds. And my dad would go off for the members area. So I would then spend the day with them. And it was a similar story at the racing. He would go to the members section and I'd be left with his mates. And obviously it was debauchery with gambling and drinking that they were involved with. So yeah, I was educated in the world of gambling from a very, very early age with those guys. I mean, I used to ask them to put a bet on for me when I was about 5 or 6, where it all started. The die was cast from a very early age that I was going to be a racing cricket fan and also a gambler.
Some of the worst ways to grow up.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's nothing about it that I regret. Nothing about it that I regret.
From a West Indian perspective as well, it's quite interesting because you're right that cricket and racing are religions out there, and the experience of being either at a cricket ground but also at a racetrack in the West Indies, and I would probably add to that certain betting shops in South London where the West Indian community are large. It's a completely different experience. The way people behave at a racetrack is actually something else, isn't it?
I mean, everybody, so over the last 20 years or 25 years of being in the UK, you see everybody making that noise. Well, everybody in Trinidad, men, women, children, at the races, they would all cheer their horse on by shouting and by doing that, sort of imitating the finish of the race. We get there.
I'll have to practice.
But that was just how we said. And of course, it was a similar sort of celebrations at the cricket. And obviously, growing up in Trinidad in the 80s, the West Indies were very strong. Naturally, one of the best teams of all time then. So the celebrations were always, enjoyment, crazy love of it, as opposed to sort of, the sort of more ritualistic passion, which you sometimes see in other jurisdictions. But I enjoyed again the experience of celebrating, whether it was racing or cricket, the way that people enjoyed their love of it and the way they express themselves. So I always still do it.
They also pretend they're jockeys, don't they? They mimic the
They'll crouch down, riding, and doing that. Yeah, I mean, it's like the guy in Antigua who used to dress up, come to the cricket as a batsman with his pads and his gloves. It's brilliant. Fans of sport in the West Indies, I loved it. I mean, they used to make up calypsos on the spot about cricket or racing, and I remember when England were there in the series where Lara got the first world record, and a Calypsonian made up a couple of verses right on the spot, obviously all negative about England and how West Indies were doing so well. Well, that sort of backfired in the years to come. But those sort of things are they're so romantically magical. You never forget it.
Yeah. Well, on last night's show, I produced a song for Webby. I do a reggae show also on Phoenix. Nice. Old school stuff, none of this sort of modern electronic. It's old. And I managed to pluck out a song called Cricket, Lovely Cricket by a guy called Jar Thomas.
Yeah.
And we played it on the show last night, and we were just a pair of us rolling around at some of the lyrics. Cricket, lovely cricket. Yeah. Make sure you hit the ball before it hits the wicket.
Genius.
I think the one I remember was the one that was also made up on the spot, and it was like something like we are proud and glad to have the English team down to Trinidad. We are always pleased to have a good team like them in the West Indies. And then there's something like, but what about Jack Russell, the poor boy always in trouble? You know, stuff like that. And then the chorus was just simply Curtly Ambrose. Curtly Ambrose. Simple but effective lyrics.
So the next Test match is the day night. I just noticed this morning on the England Twitter feed, they put some footage of what this new stadium looks like. A man about 120,000. I mean, it's an amazing. It looks like that the Maracanã in Brazil. It's huge, isn't it?
Well, it's officially the largest cricket stadium in the world. I think it might be the second largest sporting stadium in the world. I should probably check that before the next Test starts. I do know it's the largest cricket stadium in the world now. The fact that you can have 50,000 or 50,000 plus fans there, because it's 50%, is very, very exciting for watching the game. Because I think there was a massive difference between the first and second Test with the atmosphere. Personally, watching cricket over the last 12 months, and you think of teams that have won away from home, Windies won in England, they won in Bangladesh. The difference between India in the first Test and Virat Kohli in particular compared to the second Test was stark. And the idea of having 50,000 people in a stadium supporting India with their backs up or their tails up, and Kohli returning to the sort of gladiatorial type of character that we've become accustomed to. It's going to be intimidating for England. I mean, when we had Alex Stewart on as a guest on the final day, it was supposed to be T, but obviously finished before that. I asked him about when you face, because obviously he would have faced a lot of great bowlers in his time in their domain, whether it was Curtly and Courtney in the West Indies or whatever, and I asked him about what it's like facing Ashwin when you've got all those fielders surrounding you, the crowd are on you, and you've got one of the best bowlers in the world doing his thing. And he described it as suffocating. He said when he remembers that those sort of situations, it's suffocating. So I could just imagine how difficult it's going to be for England. But one of the things that England want to achieve, as we all know, they want to be the best side in the world. They want to be number one in the world. If they're going to do that, they have to win in places like India, like Australia, where it's the toughest challenge, where the crowd is part of the tapestry that's involved with international cricket. The pitches, the crowd, the toss, all of that is important. But if you can't overcome it, then even if you do get to, someone said, I read somewhere that if you want to become the number one side in the world, you can do it without actually winning in those countries. But would it feel morally right if you didn't achieve your number one status without overcoming those conditions? So it's going to be a great challenge, and I hope that England put up a strong fight. I think they will. I think that the day-night Test is going to be something to savour. Do
you know yet who you've got sitting alongside you in those chairs?
Sir Alistair Cook and Sir Andrew Strauss. So we're just under 20,000 Test runs. 48 wins as England captain between the two of them. So I'll I will.
Don't you mean between the three of you?
Yeah. I think I got about 300 runs one season for Old Finchleans. That's pretty much the extent. That was a very good season for me. Yeah, I think I averaged about 30. So thank you for bringing that.
Well, do send them our regards.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cookie especially. Rishi, been fantastic having you on. Thank you for joining us on 98 Not Out and for giving up so much of your time. Congratulations on the success of Channel 4 Cricket, and hopefully it will continue long into the future. I think it dovetails really nicely, even when Sky come back, which they will. And I guess you've got the threat of all the others, but certainly let's hope to see the successful formula continue for much longer to come. Rishi Persad, thank you very much.
Darren, Paul, thank you very much for having me on. Big fan of what you guys are doing. So it's been my pleasure to be on your show. Thank you.